Welcome. I'm Helen Graves, College of the Canyon's new instructional designer, and I am delighted that you are here with me today. We're going to be talking about using rubrics to support student success, and I think at least as important, to help lighten your grading load. Hopefully, that sounds fabulous. My plan is to share the presentation that I've got with you and then save at least the last 10 minutes or so for questions that you may have. We've got everybody muted right now, so you don't have to worry about the dog or the neighbor's leaf blower or anything interrupting us. But when we get to question time, absolutely feel free to unmute. So, rubrics. Since the beginning of my course design work in Canvas in 2015, I have come to truly love creating and using rubrics. I didn't used to feel that way. And as I learned more in the last few years about what makes an effective rubric effective, I realized that most of the rubrics I'd come across, either as a student or as a teacher, were pretty badly done. So it made sense that I didn't really see the value of them because they weren't particularly valuable. What we're going to explore today is the anatomy of a well-crafted rubric, and then I'll show you how to use them most effectively in Canvas. Truth in advertising, while anybody can dash off quickly a badly done rubric, writing an effective rubric does take a little bit of time, especially when you're first getting the hang of it. But I believe you will see that it's time well spent for both you and your students. So a well-constructed rubric is a powerful communication tool that will provide a clear and measurable preparation process for students, a time-efficient, consistent grading process for you. And that means less time grading, fewer questions or complaints about why they got a particular grade, and improved student performance in meeting your assignment standards and learning objectives. All that sounds pretty good, right? So there are three parts to the rubric in Canvas. There's the criteria, and these are kind of the big picture categories for grading. In a discussion, for example, your criteria might be the initial post and replies to classmates. Then there are the ratings, which are the explicit descriptions of the levels of performance that might be achieved within a specific criteria category. And then there's the points, and that's your rating scale. So let's look at a couple of rubrics. I'm going to go into Canvas and take a peek. So let's do this one. At first glance, and let me make it a little bigger on the screen. That might be a little too big. There we go. This rubric looks pretty good, doesn't it? It's got separate criteria over here and three grading or rating tiers. But here's why I would say it's not a very effective rubric, especially from the student standpoint. The descriptive criteria are lumped together, and the rating description just says all or some criteria met. As the student, if I got 8 points for comprehension, comprehension, all it says is some criteria are met, but I don't know whether I didn't address the question prompt fully, or if I used generalizations, or I didn't demonstrate strong critical and analytical thinking. I really have no idea how to do better next time because I'm not really clear on what I did wrong in the first place. A more useful way of setting up a rubric is to stay kind of big picture. And basically, you're just in the criteria category, you're just identifying the category. And so let me show you where did it go? Here it is, a different one. So we've still got separate categories, but you can see the criteria is just kind of the title of the category. And then over in the ratings is where I've gotten very descriptive about, is this the one I wanted to show you? Sorry, this isn't the one I wanted to show you. Let me go to the one I do want to show you. Here I am blowing it on my very first webinar with you. I apologize. Yeah, critical thinking. Okay, so let me go back. This one is closer to the mark. It's got the big picture categories. It's got each rating, which identifies the details. So I know very clearly as a student, if I'm getting ready to do the assignment or when I've received my grade, I know very clearly what made superior, what made average, what made below expectations. I would argue, however, that this rubric still needs a little bit of work in the tone of it. Put on your student ears and listen to this description. Average. Answers are not as detailed as they should be. Student appears to have done some research, but not enough. Answers show basic understanding, but lack higher order critical thinking. Now, all that may be true, but gee whiz, it sounds pretty darn negative and critical. And over here, I've even said the student is unable to apply critical thinking skills. Now, it may be true that sufficient analysis wasn't demonstrated in my assignment, but that rating has just told me that I'm incapable of critical analysis. And that just feels very harsh. On a little side note, in our society, we tend to have this notion that we have to make someone feel bad in order to get them to do better. So we think critical criticism is the way to go. But when you think about it, that's kind of crazy. Our intent with feedback for students is to get them to improve, which requires persistence. They need to be willing to keep trying. And persistence requires resilience and self-confidence. They have to believe they're capable of improving. When are you feeling most resilient and self-confident? When you've just received encouraging feedback or when you've been cut to the quick by somebody being very critical? It's the difference between, here's what you did well, here's how you can improve this part, and this, and this are wrong, you got to do it better. It's just kind of the same message, but with a very different tone and implication and even presumption behind it. So here's how I would say these ratings might be reworded to better encourage improvement on the student's part. So that was the critical thinking. If I look at the redone one, I took the same analysis and creativity, but now what I've said for capable, and you'll notice actually, I've even changed the labels of it from superior, average, below expectations to exemplary, capable, developing. Wouldn't you feel more encouraged to know you're developing rather than below expectations? Anyhow, here's what I said, how I reworded the description of that rating. Answers are sufficient, though would benefit from greater detail. Some qualitative research is evident in the responses. A basic understanding of the topic is demonstrated. Still not a glowing set of feedback details, but the tone is much different than that previous one. So just be thinking about how you can encourage with the feedback you're giving, even when it is pointing out that there are flaws in the student's performance. When clearly written and explicitly written, rubrics can really provide what I think of as pre-feedback for the students. Here's an example of a rubric I use in a business course that I teach at Coastline. I'm going to show you the assignment. So in the directions, I do what you do. I tell them what I expect. I want a description of they're talking about a leader from their past and leadership traits and all that. A description of the person that they chose, identify the leadership traits, give specific examples of those traits, and then identify the leadership traits that they display. Those then can become my rubric criteria. If we look down on the rubric, I've already told myself what I'm going to be grading on, so I've just created the structure of my rubric right there. I then describe what would be an excellent example of a particular criteria. A thorough description is provided, including this, that, and the other. Then I can, and it looks like I didn't quite add to this one any more than saying, if you're at the low end, no description is provided. And then I can figure out in between the really high end and the really low end, what is my other rating? And you might have multiple, you might have more than 3. You might have, however many. But That way, if you start with what's the best thing you could imagine seeing in that rubric criteria, and what's really the worst thing that would just be not good at all, and then you can figure out how to describe what's going to be in between for those. I would always recommend at least 3 ratings, just because you want to avoid the all or nothing kind of rubric, where certainly there are some things where it's either present or it's not present. So that may make sense to have an all or nothing. If, for example, you wanted them to label the top in a particular way or put their name on it, something very basic, a yes or no. That might only have a yes or a no, but pretty much most things can be assessed on a continuum. And it's more encouraging for students to see that continuum rather than you got it all right or you really blew it. So there's some kind of middle ground. Now, if I'm a student looking at this rubric, it's crystal clear to me what I need to include in this assignment, even before I get started, in order to get a good grade. And as the instructor, it's crystal clear to me how to rate each of the grading elements on the assignment. So the more specific you can get with your criteria that you're going to be looking at, and then describing them as accurately as you can, that's going to be helpful to students as they get ready to submit, and then for you once you're actually grading. So let's talk about the how-tos in Canvas. When I'm in a course, I can either go to the rubrics area, which is what I was doing earlier, and if I go there, I can create a new rubric. This probably makes the most sense if you're going to be using the same rubric on multiple assignments. The other way to do it is to go directly to an assignment. Let's do this one. And I've got down on assignments, I've got the plus rubric down at the bottom. So I can click on the plus rubric button, and then you can either create a new rubric from scratch, or and actually what you do is you click the pencil icon, which you probably already know in Canvas, to edit each of the categories. One thing to know about Canvas, they give you the high rating and the low rating already in there. And you can change the points at any time and it will adjust the whole thing as you do. And then you click the plus to add middle ratings. What has happened to me and to some other people is I'll see the two, I'll go in and edit this to be the middle rating, and then I want to add the lower rating. But you can't do that. Canvas gives you the bookends. So you just have to kind of wrap your brain around, you're going to do the bookends first, and then you're going to come in and add the middle ratings. There isn't a way to drag, once you've created that, there isn't a way to drag the order and change it. So just be aware of that little quirk in Canvas. By default, it's going to give you full marks and no marks as the labels, but you can always edit any of that stuff. You can also edit an existing rubric. So if you had an assignment that had a rubric already on it, but you wanted to edit it this time, you realized, ooh, I want to make a change in the way I worded something, or I want to change the point value, you can just go in and click the edit rubric button and do it that way. You can also, if you don't want to create a rubric from scratch, and you know you have a rubric either in this course or in another one of your courses that is the same rubric you want to use or similar, and you just want to kind of edit it a bit, Canvas has this nifty little find a rubric tool. And when I click it, over here on the left, it shows me all of the courses that I am a part of as an instructor, not a student. So I can choose any one of those shells. And then in the middle column, it's going to show me all of the rubrics that are associated with that shell. So if the course shell I'm in right now is the 01, so if I go there, this is showing me all of the rubrics that I have in that course shell. And I can now say, I want the essay rubric. I'll click it. It'll target the rubric and show it to me over here. I can make this bigger if I want. And then if I click the use rubric, when I go back to that assignment, the rubric has been popped in for me. That's all I have to do. It's really very nifty. And as I said, you can use it to even find a rubric that might be living in a different one of your course shells and bring it over. Let me show you one more thing about edit, and then I have a very important alert to talk to you about. Canvas allows you to do static points, or you can do a range. Really depends on your style and what you're trying to accomplish with a particular. I often find that even though maybe they got exemplary, there was a little something off that I want to comment on. And so, maybe I only want to give them 14 points instead of 15 points, but it's totally up to you. If you want to use a range, you just tick the box and then you can adjust the range within that particular rating. You don't have to use a range for all of them. You can use a range just for some of your categories or for all of them, whichever you want to do. Okay, here's the thing I want to make sure you know about, because I learned it the hard way and so do many other instructors. At the bottom of the rubric itself are a bunch of options. And the one you will always want to click is use this rubric for assignment grading. We're going to go into SpeedGrader in a minute and I'll show you what I mean. But if you don't click that box, the rubric won't have the interactive element in SpeedGrader where you can just check the box to indicate what rating the student got. So for now, I'm going to show you in a minute, but for now, just imprint on your brain, always click, use this rubric for assignment grading. There are other options, as you can see. I tend not to use any of them, but feel free to explore them on your own. Yeah, you can figure out what they're for. And then you're going to click Update Rubric, and you're done with this part of it. One of the quirks in Canvas is discussions. Let me go to my module. Discussions are done differently. And the only reason I can figure is they had two different people developing the rubrics, one for assignments and one for discussion. And one of them thought, oh, of course, I want to put the rubric at the bottom of the assignment. And the other one thought, now where did I put my, oh, I don't want the rubric to show. I want to have it behind the options menu. So when you're in a discussion, you've got to go into the options menu and click Add Rubric. From that point, it's the same as what we just talked about. You can either create from scratch, give it a title, you can find a rubric, you're going to change points, do whatever you want. You're going to check, use this rubric for assignment grading, and then you're going to click Create Rubric. It nicely gives you a warning if my rubric points don't have the same total as what my assignment or discussion has. So you can either change the points in the rubric or you can change the value of the discussion. I'm going to say change it. So now the points in my rubric are going to match the points on the discussion assignment itself. A nice little thing to do is to tell students on the discussions where to find the rubric, because a lot of them are new to Canvas too, and it's not intuitive to go look at those three little dots. So I generally always recommend at the bottom in your feedback and grading category to put a little description of where to find it. You could even do a little screenshot if that feels appropriate to you, just so they have a fighting chance of finding your rubric. Okay, now let's go into SpeedGrader because I want to show you how using rubrics can really make your grading faster and easier. Go to SpeedGrader. My test student has submitted the essay draft, so I can open up in SpeedGrader. And I've got this little View Rubric button right here. If you get there and you don't see the View Rubric button, it means you forgot to check the little box that says use this rubric for grading. If that happens the first couple of times you do it, don't worry about it. You can just click the title of the assignment up here in SpeedGrader, go to it, open the rubric, click the box, save it, then come back to SpeedGrader. Well, now I got too many tabs open. Come back to SpeedGrader, refresh the page, and you should then see the View Rubric button. So when I click that, it shows me the rubric. And all I have to do as the instructor is, after I've looked at the student's submission, I can very quickly assign whatever points I want, and Canvas delightfully totals it for me. So I'm going to make that a little smaller so you can see the whole thing. So by just clicking in the box, I can come back at any point and change it. And again, it will total it for me. You still have the ability to provide feedback for a specific criteria. So if I want to make comments beyond what the rubric itself is already saying. So you've got pre-feedback right in there. You don't have to keep writing the same thing over and over again. It's in your rubric. But if there's specific individualized feedback for a particular criteria, you can use the little conversation icon to write comments. You also have the ability to write just general comments down at the bottom. And then of course you always have the annotation comments as well. But I just love the whole rubric speeding. When you've got a lot of grading going on, it's so nice to have the points totaled for you, and so nice to have a lot of that pre-feedback already there. You don't have to keep saying the same thing over and over again. Because it means I can then focus my time and attention on any targeted feedback that really might be appropriate for that particular student. What's happened to me sometimes is I realize after I've started grading my rubric, after I've started grading an assignment, I'll realize that my rubric doesn't quite cut it. It needs a little tweaking. Multiple students are doing something or they're forgetting something, and I want to add it to the rubric so that it's part of the scale that I'm grading on. The thing to know, once you've started using a rubric for grading, it's kind of problematic if you go and edit it in midstream, and Canvas will give you a big warning that you're about to actually create a copy of the rubric so that the previously graded assignments still have the older version. The new graded assignments will have the newer version because they want to make sure you recognize you've now got not necessarily comparable grading going on if you're changing the rubric midstream. So best practice is to just continue with the not so great rubric as it is for the rest of the term, just so you've got everything consistent. And then what I do is I make a note on my little list of tweaks that I'm going to do for next semester. I just make a note that I want to correct this rubric and here's what I want to add to it. So I'm not forgetting to do it. I'm just not trying to do it in the middle of grading a particular assignment. That's really the beauty of what I wanted to show you about rubrics, kind of down and dirty, because I want to make sure, and now we have plenty of time for your questions. So if you have a question, you can either put it in chat or you feel free to unmute and let's talk about rubrics. And if you're somebody that's used rubrics before, feel free to share a tip with us here if you've got anything or ask a question. Yes, Colette, go right ahead.
For the discussions, I haven't started grading them yet, and I don't think I checked that box to make it viewable. So for discussions, can I not?
You can go back now and do it. Even if you're in the middle of grading, you can go back and check that box and it won't cause a problem. It's only if you edit the rubric itself, you know, the rating points or the criteria or anything, then Canvas is going to say, are you sure you want to do this? But if you just go back into that discussion rubric and tick the box and then save it, not a problem.
I'm still a little confused though, because I click on the 3 dots in a discussion board and it says show the rubric.
Right.
And I do that, but it doesn't seem like there's any way for me to click a box that I need it to be viewable in my SpeedGrader.
So have you opened the rubric?
Maybe not.
Yeah, so you have to go in to edit it. So you'll not just see it, you have to actually edit it. And then at the bottom, you're going to see all those options.
Thank you. Now I see it.
Okay, perfect. And Robert wants to know, is there a way to delete old rubrics and remove them from my Canvas account? I was just trying to figure that out because I wanted to delete some stuff. Let me see if I can go back to the rubric page. I'm going to close some of these because they're making me crazy. I have not figured it out, Robert, and wait, is that going to let me? Let me try. Yes. So Thank you for asking the question. It made me get a little more specific in my exploration. It's not necessarily real visible, but when you're hovering, oh, let me cancel this so you can see. As I move through each rubric, and I'll make it a little closer. As I hover over each one, it gives me the little edit or the X. And if I click the X, it's going to ask me, are you sure you want to delete it? I say yes, and then it's gone. So that would be the way to delete it from this course shell. If that same rubric is in other course shells, it's not going to be deleted from those course shells. It'll only take care of it here. Is there an account level view? Excellent. I am not aware of one. Canvas is always changing things, so let's go look. But I don't know that they have gone that, whoops, that didn't let me do what I wanted to do. Here we go. I don't think so. Might be a feature request that you put for them. The other thing to know is having a rubric here in the course rubrics area, it's kind of like having messy files. It may disturb your sense of organization, but it's not going to alter the student experience in any way. It's just going to be a little bit of clutter for you. So it may not be something that Canvas considers really urgent as a fix, but it would be worth suggesting as a feature request. But having outdated rubrics that you're no longer using in a particular course shell isn't going to be a problem for students, and for you it'll just be clutter. What I often do is I will go in, if for some reason I don't want to delete it, maybe I want to archive it for some reason, I would change the title to say don't use or something to remind myself. So if I'm ever in this area where I am doing the find a rubric and I'm seeing ones, I know right from the title, oh, that's not one I want to use. I want to use the other one. Do be aware, whatever you title the rubric, that's what students are going to see when they're looking at the rubric. So if you include little notes to yourself in the title, students are going to see that note if you've selected that rubric. So you may want to put the notes on the ones you're not going to be using rather than on the ones you are going to be using. Just, it's up to you, but that's a suggestion. What other questions about rubrics? Either in Canvas or just rubrics in general. I'll take a sip while you're thinking. It's water. Yes, Julie, go right ahead.
Sorry, I have another question.
Please.
So I guess I'm really one of those people, I never thought I was, that's trying to organize the clutter in my Canvas shells, because a lot of my rubrics now say, you know, I teach history, so history 111 discussion rubric 2018, and then it'll say history 111 discussion rubric 2018 parentheses 1, because I've obviously copied it. And
right.
So do I need to go course by course to delete and manage, or like there's no, you were saying there's no account level, but is there anything you recommend to sort of manage the past?
Well, this is not for rubrics in specific, but here's a suggestion for decreasing clutter in your course. What we have found at @ONE is if we export each module of a course to the Commons, just to myself, and then I clear out the course shell, and then I import those modules back in, only the stuff that's associated with the modules comes back. So all the extraneous files and images and rubrics and the multiple versions of quiz, you know, whatever else I had, that's not going to come back in because it's not part of the modules that I have exported and imported. So that may be one way to deal with all of the clutter. And I'm looking down here because that's where your picture is, sorry. That may be one way to deal with all of the clutter at once. Other than that, I don't really know of a way to deal with the clutter across courses, except to manually go in. Canvas has given us now the delete pages, so you can go in and delete multiple pages, which makes it a little simpler than it used to be, but it's still a little bit laborious. So try that module thing. And I would actually try a practice first, just to make sure you're doing it, you know, you're doing what you think you're doing. So you're not wiping out a particular course that you meant to save some of. The other thing with that process is if you have what I call orphan pages, which are Canvas pages that are published and viewable to students, but they're not part of the module, they're linked from within a module. So let's say you have an accessible description of something, and it's, you know, there's a link above the image saying accessible description, and it goes to this orphan page. Those won't come over with the module export thing because they don't live in a module. So what I have done is, if I have those orphan pages, I put them in, well, no, that doesn't work. How do I do it? I was going to say I put them in an unpublished module, but if you do that, then students can't see them. So you have to leave them published in the pages area. And what you'll do, so, okay, I hope, am I getting too complicated? Okay, so this is the way I do it, and we may have to talk with Chad about this. I actually have 2 shells. I don't reset the first shell until I'm sure I've gotten everything out of it that I want to get out of it. So I actually export to Commons. I have a new shell, a development shell. That's what I import into. Then I run the link validator, because it's going to tell me if there are links from a module page that aren't going, there's no page where the link should be going. So then I know to go into the original course and bring over those pages that are orphan pages. The other thing you could do is make a list of orphan pages. So as you're doing the export, you could just make sure to, you know, bring those over at the same time. But that's one way to deal with it. Did that bring up other questions? It's a little bit of it sounds complicated. Once you've done it a couple times, it isn't that big a deal, but you kind of got to wrap your head around the steps to it, because there are a couple of steps. So anyhow, that may be a way of dealing with your rubrics in one fell swoop.
Hey, Helen, quick question.
Yes.
When you're making rubrics and you delete, when you add a rubric to a assignment, you're making a copy of the rubric. And then if you delete that assignment, does it delete the rubric as well? Or does that copy stay in your rubrics?
I think that stays there. I've never tried that. So let's check. So I've got my, let me go to my discussion. I'll delete that one. So I'm going to go in here first. Wait, do I have a discussion rubric? No, so that won't be a good test. Let me go to the essay draft. And I have a rubric on it. All right. So, and this rubric is called essay rubric. I'm going to delete this, and if I could remember how to do it, I'm going to delete this assignment. And I'm pretty sure the rubric is still going to be there. Let's refresh. Yeah, it just deletes the assignment, but the rubric stays, because it's probably similar to images. The rubric itself, it's almost like it's a link to the rubric that's living in the rubrics area, and it's just displaying on the assignment page, but it's not actually living on the assignment page.
So could that be one strategy of kind of keeping on top of rubrics, is as you like, if you create something and you decide not to use it, or you decide that you want to change it or do it differently, you make a copy, you have to then remember to go and also delete the duplicate of the rubric, right?
Yeah.
So you don't get it too stacked up. I don't know.
Yeah. You can also tweak the rubric, so you don't necessarily even have to make a copy if the foundation of it is still what you want to do. You just want to edit or change the points or whatever, and then you won't have to worry about remembering to delete. But it really depends on how different one rubric is from the other, and the way you think. Some people want to make a copy. To them, that's more clear. Other people's like, no, I don't want to copy. I just want to edit the one I've got. So good question. What else can we talk about? Well, I shouldn't say it that way. What else about rubrics would we like to discuss today?
I have one other quick question.
Yeah.
Quiet. When you're making rubrics, do you have a strategy, and I'm sorry if you already mentioned this, you have a strategy for when the rubric is very complicated, like a lot of rows? You know how you can't insert a row mid-rubric?
Yes,
It only goes to the bottom.
excellent.
Do you have a strategy when you're planning it out? Do you first put it in a Word document or a table, or how do you do it so that you don't run into that problem where you have a grading
Right.
item that you know should be like third down, but now it has to be at the bottom where you have to delete everything and fix it?
Right. So what Chloe is saying, just for those of you that maybe aren't sure, if I'm in my rubric and I go to edit, you can't drag, just like you can't drag the ratings within a criteria, you can't change the order of the criteria either. So whatever order you enter it is the way it's going to show up for students. Some people, it won't matter to them that things are in a whatever order. Other people, and I'm one of them, a little obsessive, the order of the criteria will really matter to me. So as Chloe was pointing out, you want to do a little bit of thinking ahead of time and planning. If all you do is come up with your criteria, maybe you don't write the whole rubric, but you come up with your grading categories and then figure out what's the order I want those, then you can just set all of those up and you've got the little plus criteria down here, and that'll just give you a new criteria. It allows you to either copy the formatting of a previous one or start a new one, but you could just set up, you know, your 5, 10, whatever criteria, save the rubric, and then go in and edit. And that might be probably the quickest way. So just think about what the criteria are first.
That's a really good tip. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks for asking the question. I had it in my notes and I forgot to mention it. So I appreciate that. Anything else about rubrics? Yeah, Jennifer, go right ahead.
Yes, hi. I struggle with the range, which I like, but I'm looking here. Do you describe in the ratings, what's the difference between a 4 and a 3?
Right. I don't, and that's just kind of, I think, a cross between a design decision and a cognitive overload kind of thing. My ranges aren't usually too big because I tend to have fairly specific grading criteria. So no grading criteria is worth, I mean, they're never worth more than 10 points or so. So if I have 3 ratings, the range is never going to be more than a couple of points for each rating. And so I don't go into a lot of description. I do though, if I were to mark someone, so let me get out of here. So let's say I marked them great, but I only gave them 3 points. In the comments, I would explain why they only got the 3 points. 2 of your descriptions were great. One of them really needed a little more work, just so they were clear and I was clear why they got that. But I don't try to make the rating description include every possibility, because A, I'm never going to think of every possibility, and B, it just makes it so wordy and cumbersome. Students probably won't even then use the rubric because it'll be too much to try to remember, if that makes sense. But what are your thoughts about that, Jennifer?
So you hover over criteria and check on range, right?
Wait, say that again.
I haven't been able to figure it out, how to get the range, because
Got it. So yeah, if I go into edit the rubric and I tick the little range box, it will, depending on how many points, it will well, here, let me show you one. So if I add a criteria, and let's just say I'm going to duplicate spelling and grammar, and we'll call this practice. So now I've got the criteria there. I'm going to uncheck it just so you can see. It gives me set points, no range. When I go into SpeedGrader, when I click great, they get 5 points. If I click range, this really, and this one always throws me because it's greater than 4. So really what it's saying is 5 to 5, but it's kind of weird because it looks like it's saying 5 to 4. So anyhow, you got to kind of get used to that. But here I could say 4 to greater than 2. This one isn't a good one. Let me try 15 points. All right. So 5 to 12 is my range here. but let's say I only want it 5 to 13, or I want it 5 to 10 or whatever. I can go into the edit, and up here, I can adjust whatever the range is going to be. And you can do that for each specific item within that category. Does that
Because
answer what you were looking for?
because you didn't like the range they set up.
Right. It'll give you a default range, but you don't have to stay with that default range if you want to do it some other way.
I've been doing it by hand, like I go over to the points.
You can do that. However, if you're using the use this rubric in grading, it doesn't always let you, in fact, I'm not sure it ever lets you change it'll give that point value. It won't let you put manual points. So if you want to grade manually, knock yourself out. I'm too lazy. I prefer to have Canvas do it for me. So I spend my time creating a rubric and then I just click, click, click. But the range allows you to have that flexibility while Canvas will still do the totaling and everything for you. So that's one way I really like range, because I can be flexible in what I'm giving them, but I don't have to do all of the work.
And so setting it up, the best thing to do is to put your endpoints first.
Yes. And so my endpoint, I might want to have a range. So I could change this to be from 6 to 2 points. And then my endpoint would be from 2 to, so you have all kinds of things, but yes, start with the best possible scenario, the worst possible scenario, and then fill in the middle, however many are appropriate for whatever you're doing. Sometimes might be 3, could be 4. I wouldn't really go more than 5 categories, just again, because it gets overly complicated and it's hard for you to process. It's hard for students to process.
Good. Thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. Did that bring up a question for anyone else? Or a different question? You're also polite. Go right ahead, Robert.
So I'm not sure if I can even properly articulate this.
Okay.
So I have an assignment, right? And I want to add a rubric. And I go to add existing rubric. I have 17,000 courses in there. And I'm like, okay, I know it's in Sociology 101. So I go and I've got 18 Sociology 101s.
Yeah.
And each one has different amounts of rubrics. Is there a way to get rid of the ones that I won't ever use out of those? Or to get rid of like Spring 17's Sociology 101 because I only want the most revised rubric?
That is an institution decision as to how long courses are archived within your Canvas instance. What occurs to me as a possible workaround, and again, Chad may have things to say about this, but is to ask for a development shell, and that's where you keep your active rubrics. So you know immediately that's the shell I'm going to go to whenever I want to grab a rubric, because that's the one that has my most current rubrics. It'll mean you have to manage what's in that shell every once in a while, but it may be simpler and less time consuming than trying to sort through the dozens and dozens and dozens of courses that you've got with all your rubrics.
I think that's probably the best way, because I asked Chad before and I don't think there was a way we found to do it.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're suggesting it's probably easier, because I do have a development shell. So just to put the active rubrics in the development shell, and then that way I just go to the one development shell to pull out. Okay.
Yeah,
Perfect.
that seems to me the least time consuming way of doing it if you've got a bunch of shells.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah. These are good questions you guys are asking and making me think. Anything else? You're welcome, Athena. I just saw your chat. That's what I was responding to. Rebecca, tell me,
you're afraid of rubrics, so this has been great.
Go ahead. What?
Oh, no, I said I've always been afraid of rubrics, so this has been great.
I hope so. I will tell you, in my work with faculty and with OEI and @ONE in Course Design Academy, when I can get them to try a rubric, they always come back and say, oh my gosh, it's the best thing since sliced bread. It makes grading so easy. So I hope this has spurred you to give rubrics a try, because I think you will become yet another convert. I hope.
I think you're right.
Yeah. Colette, excellent question. And she's asking, where can you get more samples of Good Tone? In terms of finding ideas for rubrics, I am a Google fan for everything. Whenever I want to know about anything, I just try to Google it. So I know that if you Google example rubric essay, college or higher, some kind of search term like that, you're going to get lots of examples. So you can find example ideas for all kinds of disciplines and activities and things to help you start thinking about, well, what criteria do I want to be grading on, and what might I say, and how could I break it down? They aren't always positive, I will admit. So you may have to create a little campus-wide group of colleagues where a few of you get together and say, hey, can you help me figure, I'm not quite happy with how this, or does this sound friendly enough, and kind of work with people, because there are a lot of not well done rubrics out there. And a lot of us come from that, our cultural belief, you got to make somebody feel bad in order to get them to do better. So my rubric is going to be really, and I just don't think that's actually an accurate assessment of human nature or the best way to encourage our students. But you're not going to find a lot of examples out there. So I think you're going to have to make your own examples. And there's nothing wrong with using, plagiarizing your own rubrics. So maybe you've got an English essay rubric, but some of it will make perfect sense for some other activity you're doing. You just kind of tweak it a bit, but the tone of it is going to be, and the skeleton of the description is going to be very similar. You're just tweaking the specifics so it fits this different activity. But I think you're not going to find a lot of examples. And if you do find some, please let me know, because I'd love to be able to share those with people. But tone is really a tough one to find well done on just out at large. I know that was kind of a non-answer, Colette, and I'm sorry, but that was really all I could say about it. Anything else? Well, you've been very gracious with your time. I've enjoyed talking about rubrics. I will figure out with Joy where this recording is going to live, and I'm sure we'll be letting you know if you ever want to revisit it or share the idea with your colleagues. And thank you so much for being here. Is there any kind of formal goodbye, Joy or Chloe, that we should do?
Thank you,
Whatever
Helen.
sign off you'd like to use, Helen.
Okay, well, I have one for my bite-sized canvas. I haven't come up one with you guys yet, but I'll think about that. Okay, thanks so much for being here, and I'll talk to you all later. Bye.
Thanks so much, Helen.
Thank you.